Hey, what's up, guys? Mr. Flores here. And now that we know how to deal with complex numbers, we can solve quadratics by using square roots. Okay, and basically, what this is just another way we can solve them. We can make it a little easier. So really, what you want to do is you solve by using square roots. Is if you only have an x squared. Okay, if you notice, there's really no. It's not like negative 2x. There's no trinomial. There's really only two pieces. And this is the instance where you want to solve using square roots. So what you want to do is you ultimately want to get the x squared by itself, so you can take the square root of both sides and get an answer. So in order to do that, I want to get this negative 2 to the right side by adding it. So I have 2x squared equals 8. Then you want to divide both sides by 2. We get x squared equals 4. Okay, we all know that the inverse of squaring something is taking the square root. So you take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 4 is plus or minus 2. And that's your final answer. Okay, because we don't know what number we plugged in for x. So if you plug a positive 2, 2 squared is 4. If you plug a negative 2, the answer is also 4. So you're always going to get plus or minus. You could also write it x equals negative 2, comma 2. Same thing. Doesn't really matter. All right. But the name of the game is get the x squared alone, square both sides, simplify. So this one we have x squared plus minus 4 equals 5. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. And you get x squared equals 9. Again, with the x squareds alone, to get rid of the squared, use square root. X equals plus or minus 3. Right. Some of these are very straightforward, pretty easy. Some not as much. Negative 3x squared equals 75. Divide both sides by negative 3. You get x squared equals negative 25. Again, we want to get rid of that squared, so we square root both sides. Now is when we get a little trickier, though, because we know that the square root of x squared is x, but we need to remember our good old friend, imaginary numbers. The square root of negative 25 is really 5i. So your answer is plus or minus 5i. Okay. Imaginary numbers are going to stay. That's how we just learned them. So we can do stuff like this. Okay. Going on to a harder one. So we have 3x squared plus 2 equals negative 5. We want to subtract 2 first. So you get 3x squared equals negative 7. Okay. Now we need to get that x squared alone. So we divide both sides by 3. You get x squared equals negative 7 over 3. Okay. This is where kids get tricked. Or not tricked, but it just gets trickier. Because in order to get the x by itself, we must square root both sides. So you get x equals the square root of negative 7 over the square root of 3. Okay, and this is where you run into problems, because if you remember from algebra and even geometry, you can't have a radical on the denominator. So this isn't our final answer. Okay, in order to get the final answer, we need to multiply the numerator and denominator by square root of 3. Okay, because we need to rationalize the denominator. The radical 3 times radical 3 is just 3. Radical negative 21. Radical negative 7 times radical 3 is negative 21, which we can simplify it to be I radical 21 over 3, and it's going to be plus or minus. Okay. Whenever you take the square root, you have to do plus or minus because you don't know which one it is. And again, that's just review. If you have a question on that, come see me. Okay. But remember, you have to rationalize your denominator. The square root of a negative is just I, plus or minus I, square root of 21 over 3. All right, we'll do one more like that. So 4x squared plus 39 equals 0. Subtract 39 from both sides. So we have 4x squared equals negative 39. Divide both sides by 4. Since we want to get the x squared alone, we have x squared equals negative 39 over 4. Okay. Again, we must square root everything because we want to get x alone. So it becomes x equals the square root of negative 39 over square root of 4, which simplifies to I square root of 39 over 2 plus or minus. And that's all she wrote. All right. Again, this solving using square roots isn't hard. You just have to remember all your rules of radicals. You can't have them on the denominator. You take the square root of a negative number, the I comes out, so on and so forth. All right. The name of the game here is make sure you're always simplifying, because a lot of kids forget to simplify, and that's where they run into trouble. Okay. But you're only ever going to use the square root method if it's just x squared and another number. For instance, there's no x. It's just x squared. There's no like 2x, or it's not negative 5x. It's just x squared is the only variable we have. And that's when you're going to use the square root method. Okay? And don't forget that when you square root something, it's plus or minus, because you don't know which type of number your answer is. Okay? Because when you square a negative and you square a positive, you get the same thing as long as it's the same number. So if you have questions, let me know. Check out some of the other videos. Work on the worksheet underneath to get some extra help with it. If you have questions, have a good one. Or if you have questions, let me know. Then have a good one.